In every moment, you choose who you want to be and how you want to live your life. It is your ultimate power and your inescapable responsibility. You are the master of your reality. It doesn't always feel that way, though, right? I mean, too often we believe the awful fictions of our fears. We believe our misguided assumptions and faulty logic. We perpetuate our insecurities and vanities. We misperceive our strengths and weaknesses, misperceive success and value, and we fail to listen to each other and to our own hearts. How do we take back control, creating the lives we want for ourselves with awareness and accountability? That's the question we consider in this interview series, Mastering Your Reality. We consider the question with remarkable people who clearly have a lot to teach us on the subject. Today's guest is one such person. Adam Grant is a highly acclaimed professor of management and psychology at Wharton. He makes a rigorous academic study of things like generosity and helping, meaningful work, leadership and culture, originality and non-conformity, work motivation, and success. He's published more than 60 articles in a wide range of leading academic journals. But his groundbreaking insights transcend academia. They are universally relevant and important. It's no surprise then that his work is also wildly popular. Everybody raves about it. Professor Grant has written 3 New York Times bestselling books that have sold more than 1 million copies and have been translated into 35 languages. Professor Grant, thank you so much for being here with me today. I really appreciate it.
It's always been my dream to have a conversation with Weasel Wiesel, so great to be here, Isaac.
Well, it's a humble dream. I'm glad. I'm glad we can make it happen.
When you joined the show, did they give you a Zach Morris phone?
You know, by my day, the technology had advanced. We had much more, much sexier cell phone technology, I guess.
So disappointing.
Yeah. Well, thanks for that. So I want to jump in and I want to start with a phenomenal quote that you tweeted yesterday, I believe, from Douglas Adams's Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. And he says, as you tweeted, it is a well-known fact that those people who most want to rule people are ipso facto those least suited to do it. I think that idea really encapsulates a lot of your work, and I wonder if you agree, and maybe you can tell us why.
Yeah, it does. You know, it's funny. I first became aware of this not from Douglas Adams, but from sitting in an academic department where you would basically look around and try to figure out who wanted to be the department chair or the dean, and then immediately rule those people out of consideration. Because, you know, if somebody was that zealous, if they were that excited to be in charge, you knew you couldn't trust them to make good decisions for the group. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, there was almost this phenomenon where like everybody would put their finger on their nose of not wanting to be it, and then those would be the ones who ended up in the final pool, mm-hmm. Which of course leads to people gaming the system. But it was clear to me from day one that the leaders we wanted were the ones who were passionate about helping others, who, you know, had much more of a mindset of being a giver than a taker. And that's a lot of what I've spent my career studying, that the people who, you know, are most motivated to get ahead and to want to be in charge are often the ones who are the least concerned about what the mission of the organization is, what the team is trying to accomplish. And so, you know, although, you know, a lot of these takers are very charming upon first impressions because they know that's how they can gain the favor of the people they want to follow them, they're the people that we can't really trust to be loyal. And so I've been really curious about how we can, you know, weed takers out of our organization, create, you know, a world where actually, you know, it's not actually punished to be concerned about others. That if you're a giver, you're able to gain influence and have a greater impact.
Give and Take, of course, being one of your 3 phenomenal books on how essentially, you know, we all gain in a culture of giving and helping. So it's almost like a sort of a Zen mind trick, though, it seems. You kind of have to sort of put out of your mind the sort of desire to lead and inspire to, in turn, become an effective leader and source of inspiration, in a sense?
Yeah, there's a great book on this by Ted Slingerland, actually, called Trying Not to Try,
Mhm.
where he explores this paradox that like the very things you do to try to achieve success prevent you from achieving success. And I made a very similar claim in Give and Take that, one of the things I wanted people to understand is that if you focus on helping others, oftentimes success follows as a byproduct. And you can think about all sorts of reasons for that. One is motivation. It's a lot more meaningful to work on things that help others than things that are just for your own gain. Another is learning. The time you spend solving other people's problems actually gives you new knowledge and skills to solve your own problems. And a third is of course, social capital. That the time you invest in helping other people build stronger relationships, it ends up enhancing your reputation. And so, if you understand this, you're like, wow, this is great. I want to be a giver. Only if you do it to succeed, it's probably not going to work. Because then you're just like giving for ultimate taking reasons. And I think that is a paradox.
Why is it that we have, do you think, this sort of bias towards the kind of alpha qualities of sort of a cutthroat leadership? I talked to Susan Cain about this as well. She's talked about it a lot, particularly in the higher education, and how we kind of filter out people who aren't alpha leaders with our sort of elite institutions or whatever. But how do we break through that kind of cognitive bias that those are the traits we want?
Well, I think a lot of it, and this is something that Susan's written so eloquently about, is the basic problem is we equate confidence with competence.
Right.
When we think about leaders, especially, we want people who aren't uncertain. We want them to convey that they have the answers, that they have a clear vision, that if we're going to follow someone, they better know where they're taking us, right?
Mm-hmm.
And yet, the very things that signal confidence are often not reliable cues of competence. Mm-hmm. I think that there's a great article in the Times a couple months ago on how there was a student who was applying to college, mm-hmm. and he had a recommendation letter written for him by his high school janitor, who was so impressed with the student's sort of concern for others and compassion, and said, look, this is a student. He didn't even ask me for a letter, but I believe he deserves to be at any institution he wants to be. And I'm afraid now that we're just going to have a bunch of college students asking for recommendation letters. But
I'm sure there's now a cottage industry where if you pay someone $1,000, they'll draft a letter on behalf of the janitor.
I'm terrified, actually, that's going to start happening. But what you want is more of that kind of behavior being picked up, whether it's in college admissions, whether it's in leadership promotion decisions or hiring decisions. What we want is to see organizations overcome the basic mistake that most of us make, which is we say, look, we want generosity, we want concern for others, we want compassion, we want helpfulness, and then we only measure individual achievements. What if we actually had information about not only your success, but the time and energy you devoted to elevating the success of others? Not, the number of boxes you checked for saying, oh, I did community service or I did volunteering, but your real contributions to other people. I don't know how to measure that in every organization, but I think it's the question that we need to ask.
Mm-hmm. Well, you're certainly the guy to figure out how to measure it, Professor Grant. I mean, if not you, we're pretty much all, without help.
Then we're all screwed. I think the most interesting example that I've seen in the last few years was at Corning, the company that made the Gorilla Glass for the iPhone and the iPad. Mm-hmm. So they had this Corning Fellows program where if you're a scientist or an engineer, if you're named a fellow, you're given a job for life and a lab for life, which is really sweet. Mm-hmm. And I think if more people knew about this, we'd have no professors because tenure wouldn't sound that great by comparison. Mm-hmm. But what's so cool about this fellows program is that when they select people, they say, look, of course you have to be the lead author on a patent that drives like $100 million or more, and most organizations would stop there. But Corning says, no, we're worried that competent takers will pollute the culture, and that if we give them permanent job security, their contributions are going to dwindle. Mm-hmm. So they have a second set of criteria, which includes, are you a supporting author on other people's patents?
Wow.
And this is genius because it can take about a decade to get a patent in the world of glass. Mm-hmm. So you don't have a lot of takers who are like, you know what, Isaac, I'm going to pretend to help you for the next 9 years,
right,
in the hopes that you will reward my generosity by making me the 43rd author on your patent. Whereas the people who day in and day out are sharing their knowledge and trying to help others solve problems that end up earning those later patent authorships. And Corning says you've got to do both. Mm-hmm. You have to show that you can drive your own innovation. You also have to enhance the innovation of others. And I think the question that I would ask to any organization or any leader is, what is your equivalent of later patent authorship that shows who the real givers are? Not because we want to incentivize takers to be better fakers, but because we want to take away the disincentives to giving and show that that behavior is valued too.
It's fascinating. I love it. On this theme of sort of competence versus competence and sort of the assumptions we make, often self-limiting assumptions about what leadership should look like in an organization or on a team. I'm fascinated by the work you've done on sort of debunking the myths of brainstorming and ideas and promoting ideas and breaking out of groupthink and that kind of thing. Do you think that maybe at the root of maybe our failure to avail ourselves of the great ideas throughout our organization, do you think at the root of that maybe is also maybe this assumption that I can't be vulnerable, I've got to be, I've got to appear confident and all-knowing, and if there's any sort of level of doubt in this idea, if it's novel, if it's untested, I'm going to just keep quiet about it?
Yeah, I think that's a huge problem in organizations. You have so many leaders who feel tremendous pressure to have all the answers and to convey this, what turns out to be an illusion of certainty. Mm-hmm. And of course,
I love that phrase. I got to stop you for a second. Illusion of certainty. I love it.
Yeah, I mean, we might even call it a delusion of certainty rather than an illusion, because if you look at the downfall of so many organizations that were at the top of their game, you can trace it to this illusion that I can predict the future. Whether it's Blockbuster saying, "Nah, we don't really want to acquire Netflix. We're all good." Or BlackBerry saying, people really only want to use phones for work. Like, why would we want all these apps? Or Polaroid saying, we've done some pioneering innovation in digital imaging, but people will always want a printed photograph. And in hindsight, it's so easy to laugh at these examples, but in the moment, this is exactly what we pay leaders to do, is to say, look, I'm in charge of this organization because I have a crystal ball and I'm better at forecasting what's going to happen than anybody else. And, of course we need to shatter those illusions as quickly as we can. But what that requires us to do is it requires us to select and even reward leaders who are willing to say, I don't know the answer here. And I'm willing to make some bets. But, let me put a confidence interval on all my decisions. How great would it be if every time leaders made a bet, they said, I'm about 64% confident that this is going to work.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, and of course, in all of the examples you cited, the certainty, the certain path was by far the safest, easiest, most comfortable. So, I mean, I think this link to sort of confidence is interesting in a psychological way, in the sense of you've got to be vulnerable, you've got to be sort of self-aware, you've got to be accountable to allow yourself to recognize that you don't have all the answers.
Yeah, and when we look at how do you get leaders to embrace more of that, I think one of the first things that I would do is I would say, look, you're going to sit down in a meeting. The moment you as a boss speak is the moment that everybody else starts to conform and say, well, we don't want to be too critical of the person in charge. We want to make sure that we're seen as allies, that we're not known for complaining or attacking. And I've worked with a bunch of organizations that have said, look, the easiest way to disrupt this is we're going to start a meeting and we're going to have the leader speak last. And we'll go around the room, we'll hear everybody's ideas and opinions, and only then will the leader weigh in, hoping not only that you get everybody's more honest and candid views, but also then that the leader's a little bit more informed and can start to think about, some degree of synthesis or, combining different views.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and maybe even start with questions, not statements.
That would be an excellent place to start. Warren Berger wrote a book that I loved on this. It's called A More Beautiful Question. Mm-hmm. And one of the questions he asks in the book is, what if companies had mission questions instead of mission statements? Mm-hmm. And I think that would be so cool, right? That instead of saying, look, our mission is to achieve the following, you said, look, well, what if our mission was, and then you toyed with a bunch of those, or went even further and said, look, if we really want to take the idea of asking questions seriously, what if we treated our mission as a hypothesis, where we said, look, this might be true, but it's an open question.
I love it. I absolutely love it. So, switching gears, I wonder if you might tell us a little bit about your most recent book, which you co-authored with Sheryl Sandberg, and maybe you could tell us first what that sort of writing process was like, and what working with Sheryl was like, and a pretty deep and difficult subject.
Yeah, so I think the first thing that you need to know about working with Sheryl is the moment that stands out in the very beginning of this collaboration, although we didn't know it wasn't at the time, was when her husband Dave invited me over for dinner, and I showed up, and their 5-year-old daughter at the time asked me how my day was, and most adults don't even do that, right? And then their son was 7, and he started quoting from Give and Take.
Oh my gosh!
I only learned later that he hadn't actually read it; his parents had prepared him. That level of thoughtfulness, it goes into every bit of dialogue with Sheryl, whether we're bouncing ideas back and forth or whether we're actually writing. And so, she has the highest standards of anybody I've ever worked with. So a typical chapter of Option B, she would draft her personal experience, kind of the memoir part of it. I would draft the research, the studies, and we'd send them back and forth and line edit. And the average draft went through over 200 iterations.
Holy cow.
And she was going through word for word on every single sentence. And it's just amazing to work with somebody who has that kind of dedication.
Yeah. It's reflected in the book. I mean, it's a phenomenal book.
Thank you.
I admire it greatly. Little factoid, Professor Grant. Not only was I Weasel Wiesel as a child, but growing up in Miami, Sheryl and her family were our backdoor neighbors, the backs of our yards.
Naturally.
Yeah, she, I'm sure, has no recollection or interest in that factoid, but it's very important to me.
Well, it's fun to think of all the ways in which people's lives intertwine, and I think one of the things that I was really struck by while we were writing Option B is how many moments that shape people's resilience are things that the people who are responsible for them don't even remember. Like in some cases, in looking at the research, people would sort of carry through their lives a saying from a parent or a relative or a mentor, and then you'd go back to that person who'd so shaped them. The person doesn't even remember saying it. They're like, wait, I'm pretty sure I never gave you that advice, and yet it was so pivotal. And I think that that's something we overlook is so much of our resilience comes from the actions we take to help others. It's really in supporting others that we discover strength we didn't know we had. And I think if we could be clearer about that impact, if we knew of all those moments where other people had depended on us and had been really influenced by us, it would be a lot easier to know that we matter and that we do have the strength to get through difficult situations. And I'm especially after watching your TED Talk, Isaac, I'm so curious about that. What are the things that you've learned about resilience from both your experience and from other people?
So it's interesting you ask that because what comes to mind is a question that I often get that I'd love your take on. So
you can't turn this around on me. I'm the one asking the question.
No, I got you. So my book, Eyes Wide Open. In the book, I share a vision on how we are empowered to really control the reality we experience. And it's a vision that's brought me endless fulfillment and success and joy in my life. And it's a great blessing. Now, I gained that vision idiosyncratically, I believe, and just in my life, through the process of slowly losing my sight, of slowly going blind, right? So that the process of going blind, the sort of bizarre journey for over about a dozen years, and all the sort of weird visual effects, really was the peek behind the curtain to show me this awesome power of the mind and kind of how the wizard behind the curtain, so to speak. I am convinced to my core that that vision, the lessons learned, the insights gained of that experience are for everyone and can have applicability to everyone. And that was both the motivation to write the book and the reason why I wrote it and how it's all designed. Basically took time out from my day job in business to do this or whatever. So here's the question that I'm thinking about now, and I don't know if I have an answer more than just that I'm thinking about it. I do get a lot of comments from folks or feedback from folks to the effect of, yeah, there's just something about this human experience where you need that. You need to experience yourself, that kind of adversity or that kind of struggle or those sort of moments where you're challenged to your core in order to really sort of gain and implement some of these insights that are born of those types of circumstances. I don't believe that's true. I wouldn't have written the book if I thought that were true, but it worries me.
Yeah, it's interesting. This is like a common area of debate, right? Like, why do we have to go through hardship ourselves in order to learn the lessons of resilience? Why can't we learn them vicariously through other people, through books? And, I think that oftentimes we actually we understand the lessons, but there's a knowing doing gap. So it's one thing to be aware of them. It's another to put them into practice on a daily basis. And, one of the things that Sheryl sort of voiced that I thought was really powerful was we were writing about post-traumatic growth. And, this thing that you've experienced, right, of going through something that you would never wish on anyone, that, you would, if you could undo it, you would. Yet you say, look, this has made my life more difficult.
I'm going to stop you.
Stop me.
I wouldn't undo it.
You wouldn't undo it? Really?
No, I really wouldn't. I don't say that with some spiritual, quite literally, rationally, economic actor kind of looking at this thing. The benefits in my life from the insights gained and sort of who I became in that process, I wouldn't trade for anything.
Wow, that's amazing. That's an extreme form of post-traumatic growth, right? Most people are willing to say, look, I have maybe some deeper meaning or gratitude or, a sense of personal strength or stronger relationships, but, I would still trade it. And you're saying, no, I wouldn't trade it.
No, I wouldn't. Don't get me wrong. I'd love to see again. I'd love to get my sight back. Yeah. But if I had to go back and live my life all over again without having lost my sight, never in a million years. Now, part of that is, and this is not supposed to be about me, but there's a whole chapter in my book about this sort of idea that I think we really do a poor job of understanding sort of, I call it I use the butterfly effect as an example, in chaos theory. And I think that one of our sort of cognitive, sort of biases or where we get things wrong in our head is we think we can go back and kind of, go to one moment in one scene in the movie and then play it all out if we just sort of change that detail. Yeah. And that's just such a meaningless inquiry to my mind. Our lives are so chaotic and it's impossible to ask who I would be or what my life would be like had I not gone blind. It's just a meaningless question. Yep. I'm convinced. So that's another big part of why I'm not interested in rocking the boat.
It makes sense. And, I guess the question that it surfaces is, when we first started writing about post-traumatic growth, Sheryl said, well, what about pre-traumatic growth? Mm-hmm. What if, you could learn these lessons without facing this kind of adversity? And I think that's what your work is all about. Yeah. Right? Trying to share what you've learned with people who maybe won't go through something really awful, but still want to have that perspective or wisdom in their life. Yes, that is definitely the endeavor. And I hope it's not a fool's errand. Well, I'm pretty confident that it isn't. And, I think that one of the more interesting things that as I was thinking about this idea was there's this exercise that I love where we do this in the classroom. I have all my students go through it. It's called the Reflective Best Self Portrait. Okay. And it's an exercise by a bunch of colleagues where they said, look, we often see ourselves most clearly through the eyes of others, like you said. And, this is great for, breaking the delusions we talked about earlier. Mm-hmm. But it's also really great for learning about strengths we didn't know we had. Mm-hmm. And so the exercise asks people to reach out to 15 or 20 people who know them well, friends, family, coworkers, etc., and ask them just, will you tell me a story about a time when I was at my best? Mm-hmm. And then, collecting these stories is really It's incredibly meaningful and enjoyable. It's also, you know, a great way to grow your own narcissism. But what you have to do then is you have to analyze the stories and write a portrait of the common themes. Who am I at my best? And when I first learned about this, I said, look, this is obviously a powerful way to learn, but what if we turn it around? Yeah. And what if we actually just shared basically those stories with other people? So I took a holiday. It was December. I took a week over the holidays, and I said, look, I'm going to pick 100 people who have really mattered in my life, and I'm going to write a story for each of them about what they've contributed to my life. And it was one of the best weeks I've ever spent, right? Sharing those stories as opposed to just asking for them. Sure. And I've never done it again because it was so time consuming. I think I overreached with 100. But, you know, I've been thinking about it again in the context of pre-traumatic growth because it's an example of one of the many things we can do to bring more gratitude into our life, to strengthen our connections with others. And I think that most of this idea of pre-traumatic growth is about just adopting those practices and sticking to them. Yeah, I think that's right. It's fascinating. That's such a great idea. Thank you so much for taking the time. I really appreciate you being here with me. I'd love to do this again sometime if you'll humor me. But congratulations on all your well-earned success, and I look forward to reading more of your work. Right back at you. It was a pleasure to have this chat, and I will look forward to the next one. Thank you so much. Thank you. Take care. You too.